This story is about a corpse found at a carnival. And it's not like when you go to those carnivals but they have fake dead bodies everywhere. It all started with Universal Studios, who were filming a show called The $6 Million Man. They needed a carnival set for one of the episodes, and so they were searching around to see which carnival fit their aesthetic, because it would be too much to actually make a carnival set just for this one episode. They came across this place in Long Beach, California that was called the New Pike Place. It would later change its name to be Pike Place, but it doesn't really matter because it's closed down, so you can't go there anymore. So they found New Pike Carnival. They were like, this is the perfect set, it's right above the ocean, this is gonna be amazing. They've got this one building in particular that the set producers were obsessed with, which was called Love in the Dark. And it was this dark building with mirrors and crazy pubs. Like, if you were to walk past, maybe a dead Rex body would pop out at you because it was motion censored. So they thought it was perfect, so they finally were able to talk to the owners. They said, okay, we're gonna use it this day for filming. So before they start filming, the set producers had to go on site. They had to make sure everything is exactly the way they wanted it. Because once the actors came in, it had got to be ready to go. So they were spending practically the whole day there, and all the set producers were thinking, they don't want that logo up there, so take that down. This one's a little bit weird, doesn't fit with our theme for the show. Oh, let's move this around so that the camera crew can stand there, blah blah blah. Basically, they were really just making it fit for them. And they see this one body, which they thought was a fake body hanging from the ceiling on a rope. And obviously Universal Studios is not going to like something like that in their show. So one of the set producers wanted to take it down, but there wasn't an easy way up there. It wasn't like right above a staircase, there wasn't a ladder just hanging there. So he was like, oh, I'm sure if I just loosen up the rope a little bit, then the body will come down. So he was trying to gain some momentum by grabbing the fake Rex body's arm to try to reach the rope like this, to like jump and reach. And as he grabs the arm pops off, which was no big deal. Every mannequin has arms and legs that pop off. And so he looks at the popped off arm and he notices that there is no screws, there is no plastic. It didn't look like a human body. It wasn't bleeding, but it looked like there was ligaments and bones in there that just didn't look like someone produced this in a factory. So he thought maybe it was just too dark in there, so he was staring at it, and he screamed a little bit and he ran outside. The set production had a police officer on duty, just because, sets got crazy. What if there's fans everywhere? So he brought the arm out and he told the police officer everything about how he was trying to gain momentum by grabbing the arm, how it attached, and it was just throwing him off. And the police officer just started giggling at him, and he was just like, okay, you've obviously been in the dark for too long. Your mind's all wrapped up. You're such a weird set producer. And so he just laughs it off, walks over to the firefighter who's on duty, tells him the same exact story, and they all giggle it off. So the producer thought that maybe he was going crazy. He brought the arm back into the laugh house, and he was looking at it when all of a sudden he looked up, and one of his other set producers was crying and screaming while looking at the body that was hanging up there. And so they thought, okay, obviously we are not crazy, this might be a real body. And so they brought the police officer back in, and that's when he sees everything up close. And he says, okay, we should call the rest of the police because something weird is going on. The police came, they took down the body and they went to get it autopsied. and it was a real-life human that was hanging there for quite some time. The body was at a stage where it was practically mummified. After all this, they looked into it, and they said they had no idea who this person was, obviously because everyone genuinely thought it was a wax person. So they reached out to the owners of the New Pike Carnival, and the crazy thing is that people were in and out of that place. People would come to the carnival and just go in there, see the body, so it's been there for a while. When they autopsied him, they realized that he had died from a gunshot wound, and he was already autopsied before, because when you get autopsied, they make a clean-cut Y on your chest. That's the best way to open you up to see all your organs. What they found out was that after he was autopsied, whoever had done the autopsy, they had actually almost mummified him, and the process was called embalming someone. So when you go to a funeral home and when you see people in the casket, they are all embalmed, so basically preserving your insides for a very short amount of time, so that your family can say bye to you, and then you can go into the burial gracefully instead of farting and pooping, because that's usually what happens. But the thing is that he was embalmed with chemicals that were so strong that he essentially was mummified. And then someone hung him up.
So they asked the owner of the carnival if he knew that he had a dead body hanging in his carnival house, because that made them very suspicious of him. The body belonged to a Caucasian male between 30 to 40 years old, and he had a small penny lodged inside his throat, and that penny was dated from the 30s, so they can assume that he had been dead for quite some time. They found him back in the 70s or 80s, so he could have been dead for like 40 years at the very least. And then they also found a couple of crumbled up tickets inside of his mouth, and they were able to restore some of them. And one of them said it was from Louis Sonny's Museum of Crime. So they thought, okay, well, this museum exists in Los Angeles, it's out of business, but let's look into it. So they reached out to Louis Sonny, and he had passed, but his son was still alive. His name was Dan. So they reached out to him. Surprisingly, he said he knew exactly what they were talking about. His name was Elmer. He said he remembers Elmer like it was yesterday. He was a famous bank and train robber back at the 90s, and he was actually displayed at his dad's Museum of Crime. And he said he didn't think he was real. He thought he was just a kind of a wax statue. So, to give you some information, it was Elmer McCurdy. But the interesting thing is how he ended up there. It was a whole roller coaster. He went through the hands of a lot of people, including some of the most notorious carnival owners. Even the Hollywood Wax Museum owned him at one point, and everybody claimed they thought it was just a wax figure. Well, that was what the police, they wasn't sure about this, because even if you look at him, it's just a little bit weird. There was one point where some of his fingers was cut off because he was being handled improperly, and people could see that maybe it was not a really wax person, but they just went along with it. Anyways, so Elmer McCurdy was born into a very dysfunctional family. His mom's name was Sadie, and he was 17 at the time that he was born. Now, keep in mind that this happened in the 90s, the only time that you can't be pregnant at 17 and you go on an MTV show. You just couldn't be pregnant at 17 and be accepted at the same time. And also there was a rumor around the town that he was a product of incest, that Sadie's cousin had assaulted her and then made her pregnant with Elmer McCurdy. Sadie's brother and sister-in-law decided to adopt Elmer as their own, and they weren't even going to tell Elmer that they weren't his biological parents. And Sadie was actually going to live with them, so she could see her own son growing up, and she had to pretend just to be an aunt. But then Sadie's brother ends up dying at one point, and that's when Sadie was like, he's 13 years old. She felt like she should tell him the truth, but actually it really messed him up in the sense that he felt really betrayed and resented from both his mom and Sadie. He started drinking and misbehaving as a teenager, committed lots of acts of petty thefts. At one point, he decided he couldn't live with both of these people. He moved back to his hometown where his grandfather was. He actually had a plumbing business and he started working with his grandfather. He actually was really good. He was hardworking and determined. People loved him. But then about that time there was a huge economic depression, so he lost practically all of his jobs as a plumber. And then the following year, while he was unemployed and resorting the crime, his grandpa and then his mom said he died in the same month. So he was just completely emotionally and physically obliterated, and he just did not feel like human anymore. He was drinking all the time, getting odd jobs in different states, and then he would lose all of these jobs because he couldn't show up because he was drinking so much.
This was going on for about 7 years when he decided he needed to get his life together. Back in the day, the number one thing that you did if your life was in shambles and you were a male was join the army. So he did exactly that, and that's where he was in this division that taught him how to make very low-level bombs and work with machine guns. He had basic level training on how to create a bomb. He did that for a while, and there he met a lot of friends. He met his best friend in the army, and they actually got discharged at the same time. So they were thinking, why don't we go rob some people? We know how to work machine guns. It's just logical. They started with robbing trains. Back in the day, you could actually jump on a moving train with armed weapons and try to rob the safes or rob the passengers. Typically, you would want to rob cargo trains or safe trains, which means that these trains had safes in them, and they were transporting high-value goods from state to state. But first, just for practicing, they robbed some low-level citizens in their houses until the police caught them and arrested them for having hacksaws, chainsaws, explosives, gunpowder machine guns, and literally sacks of money that they had stolen. But he was let go because he lied to them, saying he was making machine guns for the military, and they believed him for some reason. This actually gave him a lot of street credit. So all the robbers were coming to him and they formed a group to rob some trains. The train that they decided on had a safe about $4,000. They planned to tie everyone up, opened up the safe, and then take all the money and jump out the train. Perfect idea. So they got on the train. Now, the way that they decided to quiet everyone down wasn't trying to tie them up. They just literally shot everything. They were shooting into the ceiling, they were shooting into the seats. So they went to the safe. Elmer put his little nitroglycerin on the safe door, and they all went to hide and waited. But it didn't blow up. So he goes back, puts more nitroglycerin on, lights it on fire, and runs back to hide behind the chairs again. They wait. Nothing. So he goes back again, and does the same process, but then again, nothing happens. By this point, all the three dudes were like, we are going to get arrested with no money. So he goes up one last time and he becomes a little bit embarrassed and his ego gets in the way. So he decides to put on so much nitroglycerin that it exploded. Now, when they heard the explosion, all of them thought they were in. So they run up to the safe and all the silver coins and cash had been melted. The bond was too strong, so now they decided to scrape off some of the silver that had melted to the frame of the safe, and all of them took $100 each of silver. They tried to rob some of the passengers who really didn't have much, so they left with practically nothing.
After that, Elmer decided to travel from Indiana to Kansas. There he met another group of robbers. He lied to them, saying he blew up the train safe in Indiana and he got so much cash. So they told him, okay, that's perfect, let's rob a bank together. So after closing hours, they targeted a very rural bank. Again, this happened in the 90s, so there were no security cameras. They spent 2 hours of hammering the wall to get into the bank, and when they finally got in, he put some nitroglycerin on the safe door. They hid and it actually blew up. They walked in, but it was the outer vault and the safe was inside the vault. Now, by this point, the explosion was so big that they were getting scared that people were gonna come, and he quickly went to the safe door and he put some nitroglycerin on there. They hid again, but unfortunately it didn't blow up this time. But at the point they were really freaking out, so they just grabbed the coins that were in the outer vault, which was only around $100, and at this point it was split between two, 3, 4 people, so actually they got only about $20 per person.
After that, Elmer and his first group of robbers decided that they would come up with the biggest robbing scheme of their lifetime. There was a rumor about this crazy train that was transporting $500,000, which in today's time would be close to $10 million worth. It was for some royal family in a different country, but they were going to transport it across the US. Obviously, they armed up hella security around this train. So now, somehow they got onto the train and they started going from passenger to passenger, asking what the safe was. But all of them said that they had no idea what they were talking about. That's when they realized they boarded the wrong train. But so that they don't go home empty-handed, they put their guns out and told the passengers to give them everything they got. So the passengers gave them 2 bottles of whiskey, the train conductor's watch, and around $46 in cash. Then they jumped off the train, and later that day, on all the newspapers, it would say the world's smallest robbery in train history. So it was a big, fat embarrassment to everyone, but the police felt a lot of pressure to catch them. Because imagine, you committed the dumbest crime, but the police couldn't catch you. That doesn't really make the police look so good. So they decided to put out a $2,000 reward on each of these people. Elmer was just falling asleep on a barrel of hay, drinking the whiskey that he stole. And that's when the police with all the little canine dogs arrived, and the rumor is that the barn owner gave him up and told them where he was. The police decided to wait until the morning. They didn't want to scare him because they didn't know if he was armed ready to fight. So the next morning, the police knocked on the barn door and Elmer just started firing through the barn, and there was about an hour of the police shooting him shooting the police. Then all of a sudden, silence, and the police stormed the barn, and he had been shot through the chest and he was dead. They brought him into the local funeral home to be embalmed and to be autopsied. And they realized that nobody was coming to pick up the body because he didn't have any family in Kansas, and most of his family was dead. So what they would normally do in situations like that is to add extra chemicals into the body so that they preserve longer, especially if no one's picking up, because that means they don't know when you're going to get buried and they don't want to go through the process again. When the pathologist realized nobody's going to pick him up, He went to the police and explained them that this body was brought into his funeral home. He embalmed him, paid for those chemicals, and if no one's picking him up, then he has to get paid at least. But the police absolutely refused, so that's when he decided to do something crazy. He made a little section in his funeral home where kids and other visitors could pay 1 nickel to see the bandit who wouldn't give up, aka Mystery Man of many diseases, aka Mr. Who Bandit, and he put him against the clothes, against the corner standing up, and placed a rifle in his hand. The police saw this, but technically they couldn't do anything. This was his property and his private property, and he could do whatever he wanted with his establishment. By now, people are getting word of the town. All of these carnivals and other weird fun house owners wanted to buy the guy off of the pathologist, but he was making so much money off the body that he set the price so high that no one met his quota. All of a sudden, he got a call from a man saying he was a long-lost brother from California of Elmer and he wants to come pick him up. So he legally had no choice but to agree. 2 men came, they paid the minimal fee of the services, and they took the body. But instead of going to California, they stayed in Kansas because these were the Patterson brothers, and they owned one of the biggest carnivals called the Great Patterson Carnival. It was a traveling carnival, and they heard about this guy that was being kept, that was making this funeral home director so much money, so they concocted this crazy plan to pretend to be their long-lost brother.
So they started displaying the body in their carnival, and they would do some crazy things, like where there was a motion detector, you would walk by and he would just drop from the ceiling, and it's just weird. And then the Great Patterson Carnival shows got sold to a man in Los Angeles by the name of Louis Sunny, and they took over his body. He started a crime museum, so the body was placed there. Now, whether Louis Sunny let them or not, the visitors would shove ticket stubs down his throat. After that, he actually made an appearance in an old movie because he was a wax figure, so they rented him. He was also rented for another movie premiere called Narcotics, and they put Elmer in the little theater lobby on the stand. By this time, he was kind of wrinkling and shriveling, and he was really short because you shrink when you're dead. After that, he was brought back, but not long after Louis Sunny shut down his museums, and then he passed away.
He left all his wax figures to Dan, including Elmer. The owner of the Hollywood Wax Museum approached Dan, saying that they would buy all of his wax figures for $15,000. So he sold all of them in a heartbeat. And so they took ownership of Elmer, then started renting him out to other people. They even took him to a race, but there was windstorms going on there, so he had a lot of wind damage. The tips of his ears chipped off, multiple of his fingers came off. And so they said that he looked too gruesome to display anymore, so they gave them back to the owner of the Hollywood Wax Museum. He was placed in storage because he really did look very scary at that point. And then later on, he was sold to the owners of the New Pike Carnival as a wax figurine. Now, there is some questionability about if all of this changing hands, if they genuinely believed he was a wax figure or if they knew that they were buying a real figure. When they eventually found him, they finally buried him. They gave him a funeral which 300 people attended. Seriously, he has probably seen the most after someone who has died. They put 2 feet of concrete above his coffin so that no one could steal him. So, this is the story of the mummified bandit found inside of a carnival.